All right, so hello, my name is Stephen Hunt. I'm a senior here at Baylor doing electrical and computer engineering.
I'm Evan McKinney. I'm a senior at Baylor as well, doing management information systems and Japanese.
Off with that, so I would say an escape room game is generally like a lot like escape room would be in real life, in that what you're doing in an escape room game is we drop a player into a room or area, and their objective is to just escape the area or escape the room. And generally, how they go about that is they want to find objects or hints throughout the room itself in order to kind of piece together a solution to escape. So, something that we have done with the room itself is that we gave them a objective at the beginning, like say, "Oh, go find your professor in this one room." And along the way, they'd have to talk to like other students that are in the area in order to kind of like piece together the clues of where the professor actually is. And the condition for actually escaping the room is finally finding their professor at the end of the room. So that's just like a good example, I believe.
Yeah, in our case, we wanted to add a different spin on it and make the escape room a little more interactive and also educational. And so we decided to create an escape room that was specific to different languages within the language department at Baylor University. And so we created various escape rooms with more or less the same premise as Stephen mentioned, finding a professor and going through each room, finding these hints and such, but with a different spin, such as in a different language, such as Japanese, Spanish, French. And so we gave students a way to interactively learn their language while also having fun. And, I think pretty helped a lot with that.
Yeah, and also for sure I might add on to that where we kind of worked on the educational in that we had both written or not written, but they would have to read the language as well as listen to audio files that we implanted into their room to kind of get their hints. So it kind of works both aspects of the language. I got involved when Mr. Jim came to me over the summer, and first it was a little bit vague. He was like, "Have you ever?" He started with, "Have you ever played video games before?" I was like, "Yeah, sure, yeah." And so I remember like the next day he came to me talking about this Spoke, which is actually the software that we eventually used to make the escape room. And essentially, like over the summer, it was my job to try to figure out Spoke and try to figure out how we could make a game with it. And towards the beginning of this semester, we actually really started getting to work on the game, making use of some of the assets that I was able to make over the summer. And yeah, there's not much to add on to that.
As for me, I actually came during this semester because I work here normally at the IMLC, and I was talking to Mr. Jim about what I was doing over the summer, and I just happened to mention that over the summer I started to learn C sharp and actually started to learn Unity 3D, which is a 3D modeling program used for making video games, and specifically I wanted to do it for virtual reality video games. And he just like, oh wow, that just works out because coincidentally I have another student who was working on something a very similar project. Like, oh, that's pretty cool. And so like he just proposed to me like, would you be interested in working in a developer team with him? And so I was like, okay, that sounds kind of cool. And then like probably the week of he asked me, we had like a meeting set up with Steven and another professor about the whole escape game concept. And so it was just a happy coincidence that I had actually just started to learn how to do 3D modeling, which is very similar in Unity, which is very similar to Spoke.
Okay, so for me at least, what I felt like was most difficult for this project was using Spoke in order to make a escape room game, because Spoke in general was made to be kind of a virtual online classroom substitute to something like Zoom in order to like provide like a more interactive experience with the students where they can click on videos and actually kind of engage more with the other students and professors. However, like the challenges with making the escape room is that say we're a little bit limited with what we can do in terms of actually making a traditional video game. Like it was more difficult to say interact with objects. Like say in most video games you can pick up an object and move it around or something. But Spoke, the most similar thing you had to that were these items called spawners within it, which you could link a 3D model to, and you could move around that model, but it was not the most reliable because oftentimes you had to link it to an external site like Sketchfab, and sometimes the link would just break for some reason. So that was a main difficulty, as well as it was difficult. Like you could not interact with, say, a door or a button or anything to like cause a event to happen. So like we kind of got around that, and that, say there was this item that lets you click on it and teleport to a new location. So we kind of made another version of the room within like the main room itself, in order to like when they click on the button or click on the door, instead of just opening the door and going through it, they click on it and it brings them to another version of the room with the changes that the button would apply to the room itself. So this
In my case, it's basically pretty similar to Steven's. It's coming from Unity, which is very back-end based, and in the sense of like you're able to basically make everything, make the assets, and also make the scripts that go onto those assets and program how those assets react, and like just basically event triggers that a player is able to do inside of a regular video game. I wasn't able to do that at all in Spoke. So it because Spoke is very front end based, and like Steven said, it's mostly used for like businesses or even like business like managers or even just maybe teachers who want to get something done real quick. So it wasn't really made for very sophisticated programs and games like we were trying to create with the escape room. And so that was pretty difficult for me, just coming from Unity, which gives you so much freedom, and then being almost closed inside of a little box with Spoke. I would use
yeah
Unity 3D because, well, I don't know if I would use Unity 3D. I think Unity just gives you so it's the most common program to use when you're making a video game. It's pretty easy and intuitive to learn too as well. Of course, you need some coding experience, such as because it uses C sharp, but even then, it has built-in assets and scripts that allow you to sort of set triggers and also event triggers and have assets react to certain things. So it's not as hard as it seems because of how sophisticated the program is. But I would use an 83 in my case.
Yeah, I would agree with Evan there, because I think for sure it was just towards the beginning of the project I did not realize like the full scope of what Spoke could do, but definitely as we started getting into it, I was able to just realize how we were limited by Spoke. I would definitely suggest Spoke, because Spoke was made with like the idea of having a teacher or some similar person just come along and they want to make a nice little interactive experience for their students, and they don't need to have any prior coding experience whatsoever. They can just use assets that they can find online and insert them pretty easily in there. While like Evan was saying with Unity, you do have to have the a little bit of the coding experience to be able to do it properly.
Uh,
You can go first.
For
You have
me
something?
personally, I've actually had a few interviews since, or like while I was actually creating the Spoke escape game, escape room, and so I was able to actually use that to my advantage and leverage it in interviews and mention, oh, I'm actually a developer for the IMLC escape room. And it's like, oh, tell me more about that. And so, if anything, it's definitely a very good conversation starter, considering that a lot of the jobs that I'm applying for is definitely IT focused and also software design and just developer based jobs. And so that already looks good on my resume. I think just practically looking at Spoke, it teaches you how to manage different projects, especially since it also teaches you how to like work with like limited assets or limited tools that you may sometimes encounter whenever you're in a business situation. Sometimes like a client may give you a job to do and a program that they specifically want you to use, but that program doesn't have everything that it needs in order to get the job done. So I think Spoke definitely gave me some sort of resourcefulness and ability to just adapt to whatever problem I needed to do.
All right. So yeah, with me it was a lot the same stuff like Evan was talking about, where like it gave me experience just working with a sort of program that I might experience inside my real career, but also like just so happens I've noticed after I put the lead developer thing for IMLC onto my resume and put it on Handshake, I've gotten a lot more people messaging me on Handshakes about lead developer positions or just developing positions for sure. And I think just this whole project in general gave me good experience with working with a client in general rather than just like in a classroom setting working to complete these small assignments that don't really have anything to do with each other. Mhm. So I think the thing that I like the most about the project is for this, I didn't have too much experience with modeling. Like I have modeled with SolidWorks or Inventor before, but like the modeling for this was using Blender for the most part. And while like I was able to apply some of the skills I do have from SolidWorks, it was different enough and still pretty fun. Like it was engaging to be able to say, oh, I want to make an airplane in Blender, and then figuring out how to make an airplane in Blender over like the course of a few hours or something.
I like just the ability to create like a story for someone to go through, just creating the story aspect, and then like sort of creating the problems and seeing how a player would go through each of those problems. So I guess like the whole, I guess, front end of the game making process where you have to like formulate the story and create like just situations for someone to go through. That was my favorite part.
So my least favorite part about the project would for sure be like the actually implementing the translations into Spoke, because that was a very tedious process where like how we implemented the conversations and the audio files within Spokes is that we had like we put in these links within the Spoke room, and for each of the languages we had to create a copies of the room, and for each of the copies we needed to go in and put in the right links for the right translations of the rooms, and then make sure those links are linked with each other rather than linked with any of the other translations of the rooms. And I know for sure like there was definitely some mistakes along the way and had to go back and figure out where it was and how to fix it. And that was for sure like the most tedious portion of the project.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with Steven. And also, it pretty much links back to what we said earlier about how limited Spoke is. Because with a different project like Unity, you wouldn't necessarily need to do that because it would all be contained within one one like project folder, and so you wouldn't have to like just keep on copying and pasting different rooms in order to do each language. It would be much more contained, and that's why what I least hated about, or at least just did not like in general about it, was just the limitations that Spoke had on me. So yeah, so GitHub is basically this large open source website where you're able to not only upload your own projects that you're working on from various different programming languages and the like, but you're also able to look at other people's projects, which they make available to the entire public, and you're able to use, or based on how they allow it to be viewed, you're able to actually use the assets or use the previous programs that they created and implement them into your own program. So what I really like about GitHub is how if you're working on something or a specific project that you want to do, you can first search up the internet and see if anybody has like created a database for like maybe making something language specific in a language specific project. So look up like a database for that specific language, and someone probably has it on GitHub. Or so GitHub basically gives you the opportunity to not start all the way from scratch, and gives you sort of a starting point and allows you to just collaborate with people from all over the world while also having your work be just safe to like a safe space.
Yeah. I think one more thing like I could add on to that is that I kind of think of GitHub as kind of like a Google Drive for like programming, and that like you can put like any sort of language file up on the GitHub, or even like you put on the 3D models up on GitHub, and you can just give like a whole all your work and coding in one space for like people to see if they want.
Yeah.
I think that even if you know nothing about Spoke, or even maybe a similar project that Mr. Jim comes to you very centrically and wants you to do it, I think you should say yes, because at the end of the day, it's a very good experience, and he's very understanding, and he works with you, and he knows he can understand that maybe you're still learning the program or the software that you're trying to make something with, And so I think it's just a good learning opportunity just to dive in and just try it out and see how you'll fare with it and see what will come of it. Because at the end of the day, you won't know unless you try. So
Very good. Very good.
I think kind of building off that as well, like something I've noticed doing these projects like over the summer and over the semester is that like even if you don't know something, there's also a bunch of resources online that I myself use to help me out through this. Like say, for instance, with the Spoke, the Hubs team, they have like a YouTube channel with a bunch of tutorials of how to use the software that have been very helpful to me to just like learn about some of the little intricacies of the software, as well as just like learning of some of the features that I may have not known were there just from looking over the software myself and reading the main blurb on their website.